Welcome to the Now and Then podcast. I'm your host, Dan McCool. Join us as we dive into the fascinating journeys of professionals across the globe who have dedicated 15 or more years to their careers. Come along as we explore how their roles have evolved, the challenges they've faced, and the wisdom they've gained along the way. I can't wait for you to hear their insights. Let's uncover the stories behind the experiences of these remarkable professionals. Welcome to the Now and Then podcast. Well, hey out there, and welcome to the Now and Then podcast. I'd like to welcome my guest today. It's Jeannie Davis. She's a special ed teacher who's been in the field for quite a few years. Welcome, Jeannie.
Thank you for having me. Good morning.
Yeah. Well, let's go ahead and get started right off the bat here. If you could tell us a little bit about your background, what led you to becoming a special ed teacher, and was there an aha moment when you knew you were meant to be a special ed teacher?
That's sort of funny. Okay, my background, I have a BA and a master's in both special education and general education. And if you are going into teaching, I recommend both of them because then you're interchangeable. And I've done this for 31 years, and it's a job that I can say I love going to every day. And I don't think there's a lot of people out there that can say that, but I truly did. Let's see, what else did you ask me? Let's see.
Yeah, was there an aha moment?
Yeah. Okay, this is funny. I was in middle school, so I was around 12 years old. And a friend called me and said, hey, there's a summer camp for 4 weeks for some special needs kids, and they need counselors. They don't pay, but it looks good on a job resume. And my exact words were, ooh, I might catch something.
Oh, no.
And it shows you how naive I was. With special education, when the students did get to come to school, they were placed in a portable behind the gym, and you never saw them, nothing. So it was more of me being exposed to these kids. Well, she said, I just don't know. And she said, well, there's really cute boys down there. And, 12 years old, that's hormone time. So yes, I decided to do it. And there's my aha moment. I fell in love with these kids. They are the neatest kids, stubborn, kind, loving. That was my moment. And so I started being a teacher's assistant in middle school and high school. And it just continued from there. And the teachers that were there were wonderful mentors for me. And I knew that's what I wanted to do.
Wow, that sounds like a pretty inspiring experience. And you have your friend to thank all those years ago,
I know. Isn't that funny?
Wow, that's awesome. That's totally awesome. I especially like the part where you said, I was afraid I might catch something.
Yeah. And
that shows the stereotypes that we had so many years ago. And thank God we have evolved so far beyond that.
I'll tell you, one of my first years teaching, it was right next to a high school. So when they didn't really have a class for certain kids, they'd send them down because I'd say, hey, I could use people to help me sit one-on-one and read with my kids. And in walked this young man, and his mouth just went. And I called him up and I said, don't say a word. I said, you give me 4 days. And on Friday, if you want out of here, I will have you transferred out of here. Same thing happened to him. He had never been around any kind of special needs kids or kids with braces or feeding tubes or anything. And he absolutely fell in love. He went into the service. He'd send the kids letters. He'd send balloons. He was just the nicest kid. And he just absolutely loved the kids. So see, it's a matter of just being introduced, taking the time. They're great kids.
And being open, to the differences as well, not being stuck in your own little reality.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's great that you were able to introduce him to that as well, in the same sort of environment that you got introduced to as well. Yeah. Okay. And speaking of environment, the next question I have is, how has the culture or environment of your workplace evolved over the years?
Okay. Well, we all know the Shrivers and the Kennedys. And like I said before, they're sort of the ones that brought special needs kids out of the closet. I mean, you either had them in the upstairs attic or they were in an institution. And so through them and their influences, it has expanded and expanded. The class that I was in at the end of my career was called a self-contained class. So all the academics was done in my room unless I felt you were ready to go on. And by doing inclusion, and that's a huge word now, is special ed sort of does a 10-year cycle. And the big push right now is everything is inclusion, inclusion, inclusion. And then in about 10 years, they'll go, well, they weren't getting as much as they should. So now we're going to start pulling them for different classes. The way it's run a lot of times right now is if we have a student high enough, which would be the resource room, they may go to a history class, but then when they come back for their language arts class, whatever they need to work on, like a report or the readings or whatever, then the teacher helps them. Okay. So I'm trying to think, my students being self-contained, the academic piece, no child left behind law there's such wonderful things about that law, but on a group like my students, basically we're being told that although I have a student who is reading at a first or a second grade level and they're an eighth grader, they should be in eighth grade classes. And I feel like the way it should be taught, and people are starting to do this, and the district I'm in actually started a new program that when they turn 18, they can stay in school till they're 21 because they do on-the-job work. But I am one of those teachers that I feel like if I teach fractions, I should be teaching cooking also. The daily life skills, these kids don't have it. Many parents, not all, but many of them enable their kids and they do it all for them. And then I'll have them in for a conference and I'll say, such and such is doing this and this and this. And we're working at one of the grocery stores and getting pre-skills of what you do, when you're at a job. And they're just like looking at me like, my child he can't do that. He can't do that. And so sometimes I'm teaching parents too. And I've actually gone in houses. I mean, it's something as simple. I had one lady say, my son drives me nuts because he won't hang up his coat and he turns the light on every time I put him to bed. And so I made her a poster. I went in and showed the whole family. When he comes in, all he had to do was move something till it flips from red to green kind of thing. It was very simplistic. And this is a lower functioning child. Mm-hmm. And she's just like, it worked. And I said, well, yeah, you have to reinforce. And as far as the light bulb, I said, well, get a ladder and unscrew the light bulb. Don't let him have a light bulb for a while. And so sometimes it's such simple things that, a teacher or my assistants, the paraeducators, we see it, but parents don't. And so we're also teaching parents. And the thing is with inclusion, what's really good about it, they've started it down in the elementary where they'll get PE helpers and stuff. And these kids go to the same school. They'll move up to the middle school or to the high school and they know these kids and they've got to know them and they watch them and, they'll come up and I had to laugh because I had a general ed student come in and say, such and such keeps poking me in the back when we're walking down the hall. And I said, well, did you say anything? And they said, well, no. And I said, well, that's because they like you, number one. And number two, I said, would you let your little brother or sister do something like that? He said, well, no, I tell him to knock it off. I said, you got it. there's your solution, you know.
Mm-hmm.
They're
Mm-hmm.
human beings. They're wonderful kids. They're just functioning at a lower level. That's all it is. And so our school had, oh my gosh, it was almost like a family. I mean, these guys took care of each other. They helped them, you know, in the locker room, everywhere. It was wonderful. So
Well, good.
it's
Yeah.
it's a family thing.
Right. And I remember, before we came on the air here and started this chat, you were talking a little bit about the No Child Left Behind, but the testing that is kind of,
Yeah.
you know.
Well, the state, one, the state tells us how we have to teach. Okay.
Hmm.
And like with my students, I'm thrilled. We get a file. I look to make sure there's no medical issues, and then I close the file. And so when a student comes in, I retest to see where their baseline is. And then I tell the parents, I do high goals. I expect them to work. And, you know, sometimes we'll do a goal that might take 2 years, and that's okay. That's okay. But I always try to figure out something that's going to be functional for them. But like the district adopted a series that everybody had to be on. And on page 3, it was talking about dangling participles, plural and possessive. Okay. I'm thrilled if my kids can read it. And so, you know, and I contacted the publisher, and the publisher said, well, it's okay. We review it 3 times during the whole book. And I said, well, then you've never been in a special ed class, because it's not they're less intelligent. It's just that they take repetition, repetition, repetition. Now, the state, once a year, all states do this, they have their state testing. And once again, there's no child left behind. So I have a young man who's reading at a second grade level, and he's an 8th grader. He has to take the whole state test in an 8th grade level. And
Wow.
it tortures my kids. It really does. I mean,
Yeah, that
I
just seems insane.
it's ridiculous. And a long time ago, they used to, if he, with all the data and everything, and that he's a second grade level, he was able to take the state test at a second grade level versus an 8th grade. Because, like I told Dan, that would be like you and me walking into the final of a foreign language class and going, take your test.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's just not fair. It truly, truly is not fair. I know several parents that just exempt their kids because they don't think it's,
Hmm.
you know,
Yeah, that just
oh,
seems unreasonable, you know.
it really,
It
truly
doesn't really
is.
make any sense. I just don't
No,
get that at
no,
all. Totally
no.
inflexible. Yeah.
Right, right.
Okay. Well, they're going to do what they're going to do, right?
Well,
So.
you know, but like I said, it starts curving every 10 years, and some
Hmm.
of these things that they're doing, you know, like especially with my kids that I said were self-contained,
Hmm.
if I'm going to teach them, in fact, I think this might work into one of your questions, is here's an example. And this was when I was young, and I had a young man. His dad dropped him off, and we were just talking. And I said, "Yeah, it's the end of the month, and you know I have no money." And I said I had to take my bike into Schwinn and have him, you know, change tires and put all the stuff in it. And I told him how much it cost, and I just said, "Oh my gosh, I had no idea." And he goes, "Well, my son could have done that for you." And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "He's a whiz." And I said, "You've got to be kidding." And so I brought all my other bikes in. Sure enough, no problem. My best friend's dad was cleaning out his shed, and she called me and she said, "Dad has 4 lawnmowers that don't work. Do you want them?" So I called this young man's dad, and he said, "Absolutely." Got him on a Friday. He had them running, all 4 of them, by Sunday. And so we advertised to the teachers, and he sold his mowers, you know, because my friend's dad didn't want him back. But so he wound up earning money, and you know, I can't do small motor
Right.
instruction. So what I did is, for his reading, I went down to the bike shop and purchased a book that had all the vocabulary. All the little sockets and
Mm-hmm.
I don't
Mm-hmm.
know what they are. Anyway, um, and that was part of his reading, is to learn the vocabulary of a bike park so he could go walk, and and when he got in high school he could actually do on the job training in the bike shop. So that's the way I like to see academics done. The big picture is you've got to say what is going to help this child become a functional tax paying adult in
Mm-hmm.
society. And so they're starting to look that way. I think I was just a little before my time.
I think you were. Yes,
Because I
indeed.
can see that. Because I don't want them, going to this eighth grade history class and blah, blah, blah. And then they graduate and they sit home and collect
Right.
SSI when they're very functional kids. Okay.
Right.
So so we got to start looking at things like that better. But like I said, they're starting to realize this. They know they needed a program between 18 and 21, and they're doing wonderful things. They just opened it up
Mm-hmm.
2 years ago. And so it's pretty new, but boy, there are wonderful things happening.
Yeah, I just love that story. How you can combine learning with the practical aspect of helping this kid,
Hmm.
move forward in the world, and that's
Right,
what it's all about, right?
right. I have
Yeah.
one more,
Sure.
and this was when I was in high school. The teacher, one of my mentors, and this is before they started doing the on-the-job training. This young man, just a great kid, great parents, very polite, hard worker, not real high on the academics. And so they contacted somebody out in the government area and said, he's been working with our custodian for 2 years. Do you think there might be a part time job for him? So they started it out where it was non paid, and then it continued into paying. And when they went back out to check on him and evaluate him, the boss told him, he says, I have 9 adults under me. And he said, if half of them had the tenacity and dedication and the work ethic of this young man, he goes, this guy's unstoppable. Well, he continued to work, and I have a master's, and he was making more money than I was. And he bought houses, cars, remodeled. I mean, what a success story.
Hmm.
So they knew that the academic piece. If we can get a child to read at a fourth grade level, they can follow directions and read labels and etc. So
Right.
versus a 500-word report, is that going to do any good in the long run? Probably not. So
Right.
that's
Yeah, and it's just so great to hear stories like that. How you can find functional opportunities for people who may be academically challenged.
hmm hmm
There's lots of opportunities out there if you just know where to look. And it
right.
sounds like you're really on the ball there, helping them out. Yeah, good for you, Jeannie. Um,
No.
so thanks for that. I'd like to move on to the next part of this, if you don't mind. Uh, what technological advancements or new techniques have had the most significant impact on your daily work as a special ed teacher?
Well, I'll tell you, there's two. One is for special needs kids that do not have a voice or they're limited on what they can do. They have what they call communication boards now, and they can be simple as 4 pictures. I need to use the restroom. I'm thirsty. To actually spelling out the words, and it verbalizes to a person. And man, has that been a game changer for a lot of kids. And so that I can't. And they just continue to make them better and better and smaller and smaller. And I even watched a young lady who was in a beauty contest. She went up and she did her little her answers with her
Wow.
little communication board. It was awesome. Um, the other thing is, it's the basic. It's the computer. Um, Special education. I guess it's one of my negativities, and I think um, is we have more and more and more and more students being put in our class now. with our students, we really need to do a lot of one-on-one or very small group instruction. It's very rare that I might have 3 students that are learning their sounds and blending words and learning how to read, and I'll put them in the same group. But I lost my train of thought here. Oh, the computer. So when like my paraprofessional or my assistant is working with a group and I'm working with a group, the other kids can be on a computer, strengthening one of their weaker skills.
Okay.
And what's really nice is many of the new computer programs, it's like a game, and the kids think it's fun, and they're learning, and that keeps the data for us. Special ed, I had no idea I was going to be involved, sort of be a secretary to write IEPs and keep that much data. And, I wanted to get in there and teach, but, that's part of the job. So a lot of times I was going in at 5 a.m. just so I could get my work done.
Yeah.
So anyway, the computer and the communication boards are the two that have just really helped with kids. And a lot of parents will want to know what kind of program we're working on. And if sometimes it's through the district and it's a big program and they're not accessible to it. But, there's always other ones. I always look for board games and computer programs that are educational that they can keep working on during the summer or as a family at home.
Yeah, that's amazing. I can see how computers would really advance the field and be a great tool for teaching as well. Keep kids' attentions and making it a game like that. Yeah,
It's a supplemental. I mean, we still
sure.
are the ones that teaching the kids, but that's the supplemental that just
Right,
reinforces what you've just learned.
right.
And it's really fun. And we have a lot of people have whiteboards now, and they're interactive programs in there, and the kids just can't wait to get up there and write on them. And,
Right, right.
so that's fun too.
Yeah, well, so it sounds like they're very visual in that
Hmm.
aspect.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. Um, maybe you could share a memorable story or experience from your early years as a special ed teacher that contrasts with how things are now.
Well, one of my one of my first years, I taught resource room, and it was in a lower socioeconomic area, and we had done this great big unit. It was a big story on baseball and some of the heroes and such. And so at the end of the unit, I gave a test. Well, only the highest score was like 63%. And as a new teacher, I was just like, oh, I'm horrible. Maybe I went into the wrong field here. And I started, talking to like the person that got to 63% and questioning them. And what it was is things like the word diamond. They looked at a diamond as a diamond ring. They did not look at it as the baseball
Oh,
diamond.
wow.
And I found out that many of them had not been 20 miles from where they live.
Wow.
And we have a big mall by our house, and some of them had never even been to the mall before. And I was just like, that
Whoa.
was a real opening for me, is that many of these kids have not had a life experience. And so even though like a diamond, you and I might have assumed it, I need to take the time to teach these words and life experiences. And so like the next one I did was on the ocean. Well, they know what a shell is, but have they ever touched a shell? Have they ever heard the ocean? So I brought in a great big pool and put sand in it. We dug for shells and learned about the
Right
different
on.
shells. And, and that time nobody got under 90%. So it,
Right.
it was a teaching tool for me to understand my kids too. As far as, let's see, motivation, I guess that's it. But how do I put? You learn to adjust. And even though I taught for 31 years, I always continued my education, and every year I would tweak my lesson, whatever, because I wanted it to be better and to be better and better. And I would keep samples of the top quality work. And, this is my sample. Well, then everybody's going to try to push and meet that sample. And so, like I said, it just, I love my job. And like I said, every year, and I'm also the queen yard sailor because I'd go get, when I started teaching, here's another thing, is when I started teaching, I had a $700 budget to buy curriculum with, and products and manipulatives and
Mm-hmm.
whatever I needed. When I left 2 years ago, I guess this is now, um, I had under $100.
Whoa.
And so my accountant one time said, Jeannie, start saving your receipts and let's just see how much you spend. Well,
Mm-hmm.
I was spending over $2,000 out of my own pocket every year on items. So I started yard sailing. I started getting when I'm working with somebody else, they can be working on flashcards, just all different things. And I'd get enough so I could send them home and have parents be working with their children too, because a lot of them, I didn't really require homework unless they were messing around in class. Then they had the homework. But many parents said, well, they have siblings and we have a time that, everything has to be shut off. Everybody's doing their homework. So then that's where those pieces came in, and I just give them to them because, it's, my under $100, if I $100 budget, if I went into a teacher store, that was,
Yeah, right.
I had
Didn't
about 2
go very
minutes
far on
on
that,
that.
Yeah.
So,
Well, that's great. I just love, your acknowledgement that how these kids have a more difficulty getting out in the world and how important that is to
right,
have these experiences and how, you can provide them in the classroom. It's
right,
obviously not exactly the same, but
right.
dang, it's
Well,
way better than nothing, you know?
well, and one of the other things that I learned is I wanted to teach these kids so much. And then I sat down and looked at all their objectives and goals, and I went, hardly any of them met them because it was me. I spread them out so thin. I wanted to teach so much. And so that was a learning thing for me at my beginning of career. Now I know what to do. And like one of the things I did is I co-partnered with that grocery store, and we'd go over and we'd help them face and they'd clean. And it was a great skill. And the kids loved it because they always gave them free donuts. But when my kids went to the high school level, the teachers said, I can tell on day one when we go out to look at jobs and stuff who your students are, because there's many feeders
Wow.
come in, and there's 3 middle schools that feed
Hmm.
into it. They said, we know whose student yours are, because it was simple things. We actually had a checkoff sheet. Sometimes they'd get fired and they're like, well, Miss Davis, it's raining out there. And I said, well, I had to come to work, yeah, it's not fun, is it? And, and so just, well, I got my part done, so I'm going to sit here like this, with my hand on my head. And we're like, no, you had to get graded down. I said,
Hmm.
as a employer, I said, if you would come to me and say, hey, I got my job done, what else would you like me to do? I said, you're going to be the one that I'm going to look at to give the bigger raise to. I
Hmm.
said, don't ever stand around. There's always something to do. And
Yeah.
so, like I said, they knew which ones were my students.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, it sounds like you knew how to motivate them there, Jeannie.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Well, speaking about motivations, personal goals, and getting these kids motivated. How have your personal goals and motivations shifted throughout your career
Well,
as a
I
special
talked
needs
a
teacher?
little. I talked a little bit about it, and like I
Hmm.
said, I had some aha moments when I was young teaching, and watching parents where, they'd walk their student into the class and they'd have to take off their coat and go hang it up. And I'm just like, no, 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 no. They need this independence. We need to teach independence. And just my motivation and goals, like I said, I went from 100% academic thinking to let's take that academic piece and take it into a strength that they have. I had here's another, I had a young man come in one year. He could not read at all. Now, handsome, good looking kid, very athletic. He started drawing, and he does those characters, where they draw you and put all the little details and stuff into it. Oh my gosh. It was like a comic book. He was unbelievable. And I kept telling the art teacher that, and she's like, okay. And so he gets down there. It was in January where our semester changed. And she came down, she said, oh my goodness. She said, he is the best artist we have here at this school. And I said, I know. And so her and I worked together, and we got him some scholarships to do
wow.
art classes and stuff during this summer. I wish I would have saved some of his work, because I'm sure he's famous now because he was that good.
Yeah.
So, yes, he couldn't read, but, and that's like Walt Disney. Walt Disney just could not write very good, and his teacher, out of frustration, just said, go home and just draw it for me. And that's where Mickey Mouse was invented. So,
wow, I did not know that.
Yes.
Wow. Yeah, there's so many hidden talents and skills that people have if we just know how to draw them out and let them out of that box,
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Well, right on. Good for you. Well, that's the end of part one of our discussion with Jeanne Davis, our special needs educator. Be sure to stay tuned for part two, which will air soon, in which Jeanne will discuss the trials and the issues she had to deal with trying to teach special education during COVID. It was really a fascinating discussion. I really hope you check it out. Thanks a lot for watching.